Chris Ryall, welcome to Creating Conversation. Very good to see you. How are you today?
I'm great. Yeah, good to see you again.
Yeah, we were just saying before the recording, it's been like nearly 13 years, so it's it's been a minute. What put me in mind to actually reach out to you was just the other week we were speaking with Howard Mackey, and he was saying literally before he got onto the Zoom call with me, he was speaking with John Byrne, and of course, Elsewhen is all over the news at the moment, and you were the editor behind that particular project as well. So I suppose just starting off with the recent project onto Elsewhen, how did your involvement or relationship with John Byrne begin in particular in launching this idea with it's with Abrams publication, but it's
Yeah, through Abrams, they have a division called Comic Arts, which is Charlie Kochman's the editor in chief of that division, and Alex Ross is kind of the creative visionary partner on that line. So it started with Alex's Fantastic Four Full Circle graphic novel, and the idea is that they're doing new standalone. They're the first publisher, really, I think, that's been allowed to do new standalone Marvel graphic novels. And so they released a book last year, an Avengers book with that Michael Cho did the art on, Chip Kidd wrote. And so the idea is that they're all new, newly generated stories. Elsewhere is not quite that, because it started basically on its own of John just seeing if he could still tell X-Men stories the way he wanted to, doing a page a day over, a couple years time and racked up like 31 full issues, I think. And so, I had a relationship with John since like 2005. Um, and so, I was having fun just going and reading a page a day and like everybody else watching the story unfold and seeing what he did and all the guest stars he brought in. But the other part of my mind was like, well, this should be more than just a thing on a website. This should be a book. And he kept saying, no, 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 I don't want to do it's not a book. It's just me having fun with no editorial constraints, no publisher in the way, no thoughts about financial considerations, just purely doing it for the sake of making comics for fun. Because John was, he's in that sort of luxurious position of not having to worry about that the way a lot of comic creators do. And so he was just doing it for like the pure fun of making comics again. And eventually I kept on him about it. And we got talking to Marvel a number of years ago. And we were talking about the way time feels so fluid now. Like, I want to say it was 4 years ago, but it was probably something more like 6 or 7 when, me, John, and Marvel got together at a convention and talked about possibilities. And then that didn't come to pass for whatever reason. And then a few years later, I'd been talking to Abrams about various books. I did the Marvel Calendar collection book with them. I'd been an editor at large with them for about a year. And so at that point, I introduced the idea of doing this as a Marvel Arts book through Abrams. So it wouldn't necessarily have to be John and Marvel working directly together because that's sort of like a matter antimatter kind of situation. And so he said, "Yeah, if we could do it that way, and if you're running point on the entire thing, let's make that happen." And so Marvel was all for it, Abrams was all for it, and then we sort of set out to start, building the book properly, finding or testing different inkers, talking to different colorists, having a letterer sort of re-letter the entire book using what John did, just because he again didn't do anything thinking of print in mind, so he was just doing rough lettering. And not carefully crafting every balloon and all that. So anyway, we just wanted to make it look like a professionally fully finished inked colored lettered book. And so yeah, it's funny you bring that up, and I just happen to have a copy right here, and
ah,
it landed just in mid June, and it seems to have really made a nice splash. Like, it's been a thrill for both of us to watch. Like, not only everybody just posting their pictures, the excitement about it, people wanting to go to stores to buy it, which is anything you can do to drive actual business to comic shops and bookstores is great. And then seeing the way it's sold, on different bestseller lists and such. Yeah, it's been just gratifying all around.
no, absolutely, and congratulations to all involved as well in success. At this point of recording, apparently it's been like I think the initial print run has been sold out as being
Yeah.
reported here anyway. So I imagine there'd be subsequent print runs, and it's going for 3 volumes in total, will it be?
3 volumes, yes. And the second printing of volume one is already well underway. I think that I don't know exactly the schedule, but those will be arriving soon because I I think they knew even ahead of the book going on sale that it had already sold out at the distributor. So then, there was a rush second print. And so it'll be one of those, I think, that stays in print for a long time in lots of different forms as it all comes together. And so volume two will be next spring, summer. We're trying to shorten the window of doing them, not just a year apart, but, they're 200 plus page books. And so there's a lot of production time and approvals and everything else that goes into it. And so just for the sake of like round numbers, we're telling everybody it'll be one volume a year, but ideally that window will shorten a little bit.
That's awesome. Can't wait. And San Diego is just around the corner as well. So will you have much leading up to the show as well? You must have a hefty schedule every time it comes around to San Diego. Or do you still do the San Diego Comic Con scene? A lot of the guests, they both love it, but they also say to me it's it's real work when they do it.
It,
So what's your upcoming schedule like for San Diego?
yeah, it takes over it takes over all of July basically, and
Mm.
I don't know, some of the intervening months prior to that as you're figuring out panel schedules, building panel presentations, putting meeting schedules together. This year, because I've been freelance now for about the past 6 years after leaving IDW. So, there's bits of pitching involved and bits of solidifying different conversations and book deals and things like that. And so, yeah, it's like a heavy slate of meetings and panels and just running around from, one location to another and trying not to be late to any of them.
Oh man, every time I tried, I've been to New York, but New York, although it's big, it's all within the Javits Center more or less. But with San Diego, I just imagine the Indiana Jones map of people going around to get to A to B. But
The nice thing though, I will say, so I used to be pinned at a booth. Like IDW
mm,
had a booth and we were in the main hall the whole time, which is fine because you also then have that barrier. You have a place to hide out when you need to. But since then, I'm like, I don't have to be in this building. So a lot of the meetings now happen at the hotel that's right next door. There's a nice pool and like a sort of outdoor bar where it used to just be that's where all the foreign sales people would meet and have meetings. And then somehow everybody else got wind of it. And so now that's become like sort of the de facto meeting spot for a lot of people during the convention. And that's kind of great because you never run into everybody you want to, like as you schedule these meetings. It's just hard to see everybody that you're trying to see, and so a lot of the best meetings and meetups just sort of happen by chance, as you're just out there and people are walking by and everything. So it's just a nice way to catch up with lots of different people.
that's lovely. And you were saying you're now in the freelance world as well. So for the past 6 years, how have you been finding the freelance landscape here at the Academy? We cover a lot of the entrepreneurship side of things because it seems now, particularly in the comic book field, um, a lot of the work is independently on a freelance basis and working for multiple companies and such. But how have you found the landscape for yourself? Are you enjoying it? How has COVID and stuff kind of affected that?
It's funny because I enjoy lots of it. I enjoy the freedom of being able to do a book for this publisher and do a thing here and work on a video game there. But I also I don't know that I'll ever get used to the scramble, and the gnawing sense of dread of like this could be the last project, so I need to say yes to every possible thing. And so it becomes that whole feast or famine thing that, every freelancer throughout time has experienced. And so I'm still just trying to get used to that. Just the uncertainty of it all is the thing that I find unsettling. But again, I also kind of enjoy bits of the freedom to just thrash about in all kinds of directions. But I sort of equate it to working in comics now is sort of like if you were a guitarist in a heavy metal band like in the 80s, you could just play for Poison and make a great living and go off and do your thing. And then, after the collapse of that scene, you had to play in six different bands just to kind of start to approach the same standard of living and all of that. And so now it's kind of the same thing where like you just have to, I don't know, commit to as many different things as you can possibly keep up with and all of that to just keep it all going. But yeah, so far, like I say, it's been 6 years of it. I had an imprinted image that is, I've definitely slowed that down a bit. I was wary of outside money at first because I sort of saw the way that had a detrimental impact on IDW. Um, as far as what we were able to do and all of sort of the expectations that come along with it. And so it was me and Ashley Wood were bootstrapping it and just self-funding things. And you realize that at a certain point that paying for everything yourself is also not a great plan. So it's just been this constant, trying to find that happy medium of what I can do and what's too much and what's not enough. So, like I say, I'll complain about this at times to different freelancers, and they're like, "Yeah, we know. We've been living this life forever. So, welcome to our world."
Oh, well, at the end of the day, you have one of the most important assets though of any freelancer, which is still a name. Like anyone, particularly over here in Ireland, with
Hmm.
Stephen Mooney and so many as well, everyone like your name is held in such high regard. So that's going to take you very far, I'd say, as well, which is
That was
awesome.
very, very kind of you. Yeah, and I've always just tried to do right by everybody. Like I love the medium. I love like the collaborative aspect of it, and I've just met the best people that in my entire life through comics. And so yeah, I don't know. I would feel a responsibility to try to do right by the medium and by the people I'm working with, and just to keep it going as long as I can.
No, no, absolutely. Honestly, I can speak firsthand from it because a friend of mine, Cormac Hughes, who's doing the variants covers for Ben 10 that Rob Carey's
Mm.
doing at the moment with Dynamite, he recalls back, we all started out in comics around the same time. And I think he was emailing you at the time of San Diego. He didn't realize back during the IDW days. And he remembered he was getting a response from you. And it's like, that's insane because like he was nobody. There's a big show, but you still took the time, like the evenness in which you treated everyone, be it nobody or name in quotation marks. It's awesome to see. So, long may that carry your name in the industry for sure. And
That said, the bar shouldn't be at people replying is but since again being on the other side of the wall for the last 6 years, like there's times where I'm like I don't know how people just don't reply for months, and it's mystifying to me because I'm like time moves so differently for people like inside a publishing company versus people that are outside it. And so I don't know. I think because I've always tried to do both things, writing, making comics, but also being on the publishing end of things, just trying to be wary of what everybody's going through and trying to sort of, I don't know, like you said, treat people on a level playing field and not, I don't know, not just let people dangle. Like telling somebody no is such a better kindness than just a non-reply. I always thought so. So yeah, so now I'm sort of dealing with a lots of the non-replies, and I'm like, yeah, this there's a better way to do this.
absolutely, absolutely. And just to swing around to one of your other projects as well, you're Walking the Born Again book recently as
Hmm.
well. That was a really interesting project. I have to confess as well that it's funny because it's a book about a book, but I got also the audio book and Audible. So I got the audio book about the comic book, and I was like, no,
I haven't listened to the audiobook because I'm like, how like I would have been, I don't know that I could have recorded an audiobook, and I don't know that I would wish my voice on somebody for a few hours straight, but I'm like, too bad the authors didn't get to, first crack at reading their own stuff. That would have been kind of interesting, but hopefully it was professionally done and not, some AI voice or something.
Oh no, it's definitely voice actor, and particularly with I think Audible now are very strict at the end. They have a credit saying none of this production can be used for the training of AI and stuff. But
Yeah, good.
I was really just interested to when you get the credits just to hear it because I was like, how is that going to be done? But in fairness, the author when he's reading the extracts from the project, he does put on a voice. He does kind of act some of the parts. So he would,
Oh, so he's doing a Matt Murdock and a
yeah,
Kingpin and all of that.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah, yeah.
funny.
Yeah, so I was just like, okay, so that's it. So I was just curious how that was. I was just so you didn't know that was going to happen. That this was going to be
No,
recorded.
no, and
Oh
I'm gonna
wow!
have to check it out. I know it exists, but I haven't wanted to hear it because I think all I'm gonna do is obsess over the words and be like, why did I phrase it that way? Why didn't I say it this way? So I haven't listened to it yet, but yeah, I should probably check it out.
I don't know. I recommend it anyway. I was speaking to Michael Carroll, who does a lot of 2000 AD stuff, Judge Dredd, but he's the same when it comes to his audio adaptations. He's like, nope, can't do it. But about the book itself, so how did that come about? Because this is part of a series that Marvel seem to be doing where they're covering like the history of what they've been doing, like some of the titles. Did you pitch that to Marvel, or did they approach you, or is it somewhere in the middle?
It's so sad that I'm like surrounded by what seem like props. So like I didn't know what we were going to talk about, but I do have a copy of that one also sitting at hand.
Brilliant.
This one's at hand because I'm doing research because I'm now editing deluxe editions of the first six Bloomsbury books that are in this Marvel Age of Comics line. So adding additional content, essays, interviews, some new backup material, and adding a full issue that's kind of connected to the material being discussed in the books. But yeah, so how it originally came about was I just been doing a number of books at Marvel. I think the thing that made Marvel sort of put my name forth for this was I edited the deluxe edition of the Origins of Marvel Comics book. That was the very first sort of mass market trade paperback collection that Marvel did back in the 70s. I edited and added a bunch of historical context and pieces and stuff like that to a deluxe edition. So they said, Bloomsbury is going to be doing this line of Marvel Age of Comics books where it's basically talking to creators or whoever about, they would write a full book about favorite storyline, favorite artist, favorite something, favorite some part of Marvel's history. And we put your name forward as somebody to work on one of those. Would you want to pitch for it? And so I put together three different pitches, thinking that the best shot I had at getting this was Daredevil Born Again, because it was coming out the same year that the Disney Plus show called Daredevil Born Again was launching. So I thought that one was probably going to help sort of maximize my chances. But it also worked out because of the three pitches I put together. Like I liked the other two, but this one is my all-time favorite Marvel storyline, and so it was fun to get to spend 30,000 words telling people why.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely, and I totally enjoyed it as well because the perspective that you share, even just about, I think it's like the scene when we're introduced to like Karen, how you break that down, the closeness of the room, the claustrophobia and everything. Like
Mm,
it's such a, you really picked up on a lot and explained it well. Sometimes when people I'm always accused of this. I try to share, get passionate and share something with my friends or family saying, but I'm going too heavy-handed with it. But your approach in this has
mm.
been very good. Like if anyone has never heard read the story before, or if they haven't, or if they're considering picking it up, or if they have, and they think they know like the back of the hand, there's always something there that make them appreciate it more, which is what good art and good art critique does as well, which is gives you another layer to appreciate, and there's always something to delve into. When working on the book yourself, was there anything that you came across that you yourself didn't realize in your initial reading or enjoyment of the story? Did you linger on something or walk away with a different perspective or appreciation for the story?
There were a couple of things, and one of them didn't make it fully into the book, but I did this full chapter that was all about the mental health symptoms on display in the book, schizophrenia and all the other sorts of things that not only Matt Murdock went through, but some of the other characters as well. And so there's a book called the DSM-5 Guide, which is this real thick. It's the book that sort of breaks down all the sort of psychological and mental illnesses. That's a book that psychiatrists use. And so I went through and applied sort of the way Frank Miller treated these symptoms and thing conditions on display in the book versus their real world, descriptions and how they're evidenced in real life. Um, and ultimately, like it was deemed that because I am not a mental health professional, I shouldn't be, pulling from this book and delving into stuff like that. I found it really interesting because it would like not only thinking about the book itself, but the time that it was written. It was written in the mid '80s, which is a time when storytelling wasn't exactly subtle, and in so many different parts of pop culture in the '80s, we were sort of shorthanding things or stereotyping or doing all of the, I don't know, not putting a lot of nuance into characterization. And so for Frank Miller to write a book in that period and a superhero comic book that, was ostensibly aimed at kids, or at least at all ages, like to sort of show the level of nuance and I don't know, care that he gave to all of these the characters and the symptoms on display in the book, I found really fascinating because it wasn't like comics required that from their creatives at the time. And so I found, he didn't heighten anything to such a crazy degree that it was, it entered parody or stereotypes or anything like that. I don't know. Like I said, I thought it was very sensitively handled. And so that was one part of it. And then the other thing is, again, something else they didn't make it into the book, but like I was looking at there were different parts of pop culture where you could tell David Mazzucchelli, or at least I presume David Mazzucchelli was influenced by or sort of borrowed the visual from, or at least referenced it. You know, like the final scene of Born Again is after Matt and Karen go through everything and they sort of find their way back to, normalcy to whatever degree. And then to each other, there's a scene where they're walking down the middle of the street in New York and they're kind of, leaning on each other and smiling. And it's the cover of the Freewheel and Bob Dylan. Um,
Ah,
and it's again, it's one of those things where I'm like, well, this had to be that it was pulled from that. And there's all the overhead shots that Mazzucchelli did, these great establishing shots where you see Matt first in the comfort of his own cushy bed, and then he's in a rat hole apartment, and then he's on the street, and it's all seen from this overhead angle. There's a 70s movie at the time that basically had that same shot, and so it felt like, well, he had to have been influenced by this, but again, it was deemed that, like, even though these books are largely opinion books, my opinion, sort of presuming what Mazzucchelli was thinking or referencing, was deemed as something to not speculate on, because we didn't want to, you know, assume that he actually borrowed or was referencing those images. But they felt very. It felt like he probably was, and of course, I don't see that as any bad thing. I wasn't saying he ripped
mhm,
them off or anything. It was just more of like,
us.
those are the stuff that kind of play in your head as you're growing up, all the different sort of pop culture that influences you and your storytelling. I just found that kind of thing really fascinating too.
Oh, awesome. And do you know if either Miller or Mazzucchelli managed to get a copy of Wade, the book?
I would imagine David is completely unaware of it. David pays attention to David's art and the stories he wants to tell now and teaching and all of that. And so I don't think talking about his superhero time is a thing he likes to spend much time on. I did reach out to I put together a lot of interview questions for Frank.
Mhm.
Um, and then I decided against it because I thought, well, it's not really that kind of book. Like, these are supposed to be, like I say, opinion books, or one person's perspective. And I thought, well, if I'm talking to the creators, then that just kind of changes everything. And like, I was personally more interested in talking to Frank, and I thought that would have been really fun. But I also thought, well, that changes what the books are supposed to be, and so we decided not to do it. I know Selene, Frank's partner, has seen a copy, but I don't know if either one has read it. I certainly wouldn't expect them to. Um, but yeah, like I say, it was just fun to be able to spend 30,000 words talking about why I think both guys were just so great. And why I think, honestly, Born Again is even superior to Batman Year One, which I know most people think it's the other way around, but they're wrong. So
There goes the comment section now. There goes the
yeah,
comment
yeah,
section of this episode.
yeah.
But no, that's it's great. As I said, I really recommend the book to everyone listening if they didn't have a chance to check it out. I totally enjoyed it, and it did give me a fresh perspective as well on a couple of points. Even that establishing shot in the bed, I remember as well, was like that was something as well to reflect on. For yourself, Chris, now that you walk both lines of being both the writer and an editor, is there anything from your editorial career or vice versa that has informed the other role? Like, have you ever, when you begin writing or plotting something out, catch yourself, with advice you would have given some other writers who would have worked with you in the past? Or is there any underlying philosophies or advice that you've received or often just live by when working on a project that that you often find yourself coming back to?
It's more of just feeling the pressure to kind of, I don't know, live up to the works of the people that I've worked on in the past. Like, for example, Joe Hill doing Lock and Key. Like, every time one of those scripts came in, I was completely just dazzled by how smartly done they were and how well paced and well structured the story was and all of those things. And so I think it's more of that. It's like I've seen the bar raised so high by so many different creators I've worked with, um, that I don't try to write like anybody else, but I do try to make sure that I'm thinking through everything to the degree that, you know, giving all the projects the same thoughtful approach that people like Joe Hill or John Byrne or whoever else put into their books. The other thing, and it's kind of a simple thing, but like talking to John Byrne about storytelling, he says, every page is its own story. So every page, the whole goal is, you're starting upper left, and the idea is to get people to get to the bottom right of the page and want to turn the page and see what happens next. And so treat every page almost like it's its own little story where it's to be continued, and the to be continued is getting them to want to turn the page. And like, it sounds simple because obviously you want people to keep turning the pages, but like, it does sort of just switch something in your brain when I don't know, to not waste any page, or not sort of, or treat a page where it doesn't flow right, or where it may not give somebody that compelling reason to want to keep going. And so just stuff like that is kind of all of it. Just and also all the comics I've read throughout my entire life, like, just inform my approach to where I'm like, sometimes you feel intimidated. You're like, well, why do people need more comics from me when that stuff already exists? Like, I've been rereading Alan Moore's Swamp Thing again, when it's 40 some years old, and it's one of the greatest comic books ever written, and just still the things he did in there are so smart, and so, I don't know, just feel out of reach for most people, that it's one of those where you just, I don't know, kind of keep striving to attain whatever level or approach of greatness that you've seen in all these other books.
No, absolutely. I think it's the moment where you think, well, that's it. I've got it 100% perfect. I think that's the moment either you've become delusional, or it's the moment where you've kind of given up. Everyone's constantly striving or reaching. That's what I've always found when doing the conversations on this particular podcast is no matter who it is, how widely they're admired around the world, they're still reaching and evolving and growing. And that's what art is, really. It's an evolving process, as they say.
This
As
isn't, so this is, sorry, this to sort of punctuate that, this isn't a comic book thing, but I was on set a few times for Francis Coppola's Megalopolis, because I adapted that to graphic novel form a couple years ago. And so Dustin Hoffman was like a bit part in the movie. He had a very small role, and a lot of it was sort of in the background or just on the sidelines. But I was on set, and he came up at one point to Francis between scenes, and he was so nervous and asking these questions like, well, where do I stand? Well, how do I do this? How should I say this line? Do I do this? Do I? And I'm like, Dustin Hoffman is one of the greatest actors of his generation, and just that he was still striving and kind of insecure, and just wanting to make sure not only that he pleased Coppola, but just that he did the best job he could do. And like that I think is the thing you've got to, when you're trying to make anything, you got to try to hold on to that, is like, well, you're always learning, you're always evolving, you're always, I don't know, you never know more than I don't know, somebody else. Or I think just that you're still asking questions and trying to figure out how to improve. And that just impressed me, because I'm like, well, this scene, especially the scene he was asking about, didn't matter at all, like, to his character. But to him it did. And to him, he wanted to make sure he got every part of what was expected of him right. And I don't know, I was just impressed by that. Like, that if somebody at that level is still striving and trying and asking questions, then everybody that's trying to make stuff should keep doing the same.
Absolutely, that's incredible, and yeah, and it's just great to hear as well that no matter what level, the passion and commitment to the art is still there as well. And that must have been a wild experience as well, being on that particular in that particular set. How did you? Was that your first time attending like a film set with tying into your work, or have you visited other sets in TV or film before to do adaptation?
I've done so, yeah. I mean, doing different adaptation and things like that. I've been on various sets over the years, and the most ridiculous one was, so we did Terminator 4 comics. It was the
Mhm.
one with Christian Bale, and the director of the movie was McG. And I remember they had everybody that was doing all the tie-in stuff, the comic book people, T-shirts, action figures, like all of the people that were making stuff connected to the movie were on set to watch some scenes. And so the director McG came out, and he said he's trying to do the big song and dance to get everybody excited about him making a new Terminator movie. And he said, "All right, everybody, I want you to know this is going to be Terminator done right." And we're all just like, dude, James Cameron got it right. Like, you wouldn't be here if not for James Cameron. So just, it's kind of that. It was like never wanting to be that guy, never wanting to be the guy that just presumes that like you're the reason something exists, or that you're the smartest or best one in the room. I was like, that's a bold statement to make, that you're finally going to get Terminator right when Terminator 1 and 2 did a pretty good job of getting it right. But so anyway, from that to Megalopolis, yeah, that Megalopolis was fun because I'm like, I wasn't the person adapting the book from afar, like with Terminator or whatever else. Coppola sat a chair next to him, so I'm like watching him direct and just I don't know, just sitting there watching Francis Coppola direct scenes was so surreal because I'm like, I don't even know what I'm doing here next to this guy, let alone like sort of being a somewhat of a participant in whatever way. So yeah, that was just amazing and one of those things that just I don't know, again, just kind of came about out of the blue and was very weird and gratifying.
It's interesting because, as of recording, as far as I'm aware, there's no home release or streaming of
Yeah.
Megalopolis. It was purely comics, oh, sorry, purely cinema. But the fact that there's a comic adaptation then as well, it was Coppola, a comic reader himself. I know the gentleman whose name I'm blanking on, who wrote The Godfather, wrote Superman films. So there's kind of tenuous.
Mario Puzo, yeah,
Mario, exactly. Thank you.
yeah.
So there's that connection there, I suppose. But was Coppola, was he a comic book reader himself, or a fan of sequential art in general? Or is this just
He
something he?
so he was. I mean, he hasn't for the last 50 some years because, as you said, I've been doing other things. Um, but as a kid, he was, and I knew he was not just being like the Hollywood guy dropping names like you sometimes hear when somebody goes, "My favorite books are Dark Knight Returns and Watchmen." Like, okay. But Coppola goes, "No, no. When I was a kid, me and my brother read comics all the time. And my favorites were Jack Cole's Plastic Man, the Phantom, and the Heap." And I'm like, nobody mentions the Heap if they weren't actually reading the heap. So yeah, I mean, again,
Yeah.
he said he hadn't read comics in forever, but he said the two things that he wanted to accomplish in his life while he was making that movie was he wanted to hold his great granddaughter who was about to be born, or I'm sorry, maybe it was just his granddaughter, and he wanted to hold his first graphic novel, and so that was kind of fun to be able to deliver one of those two things.
That's awesome. That's amazing. And for yourself at the moment, Chris, like what are you currently working on now or towards Fish? Is there anything you can share at the moment, or are you currently R&D in a lot of stuff?
Yeah, so I've got a number of books that I've been doing with Dark Horse, the Marvel related collections. So we recently just sent to print a big book that was this sort of oversized collection of Jack Kirby's monster stories. I assisted on they do a line of books called bullpen books, which are sort of like smaller editions of the artist editions with additional content and a bunch of editorial pieces and trivia and facts about the books and the art and stuff like that. So I've co-written a couple of those. I did a Vampire Tales collection. I'm doing a number of black and white collections, starting with Weapon X. So a lot of Marvel related books there. I've got a Marvel book, another Marvel book with Abrams right now. Um, Editing the John Byrne books. I got some comics. I haven't done as many like periodical comics, but I do a
Mhm.
book called Dread the Halls. That's a Christmas horror anthology that comes out every December. And then we do a spinoff called Dread the Hall H, which is all comic convention horror stories. So that one comes out right the same week as Comic Con. Uh, um, and I've been working like doing some narrative work on a new video game that was created by Richard Garfield, who's the Magic the Gathering creator. Um, so yeah, like I say, sort of thrashing about in lots of directions. Let me see what else. I'm executive producer on a TV adaptation of the graphic novel Saucer Country,
Oh,
which is
cool.
Paul Cornell and Ryan Kelly. That was one that I brought over from DC to IDW back in the day, and then we finished the storyline through my imprint at Image, and so that's in development now as a TV show. So
Which
yeah, lots of
studio will be adapting that, can you say?
don't know yet. It's a
Oh,
production company called Plot Point One who's working on
okay.
the pilot with Paul Cornell right now. And then once the pilot is, they create and make the pilot and then go out and
Mhm.
sell it from there to a streamer. And so we'll see where that one ends up. Hopefully somewhere, you
Yeah,
know.
awesome. And
And
do they still do pilot season? I know that used to be a thing. I don't know now because with streaming, it seems so much more
yeah, not in the
different. But yeah,
streaming world
yeah.
anymore. Although they do still. Well, I take it back. There's not really a season, but there are
Mhm.
still pilots that are produced. Like we produced a Lock and Key pilot for Hulu a few years ago that we thought was going to like it felt like a can't miss sort of thing. Um, and it missed, you know, and then so then it ended up at Netflix and reshot it again. But yeah, that pilot was made just like the Fox pilot, the Lock and Key Fox pilot was also made and didn't go anywhere. So there are still like sort of proof of concept pilots made, but it's not like a season where three network buyers go in there and decide like which ones they're gonna pluck out and make.
Yeah. Absolutely. And you also had experience as well with obviously some of the Star Trek line books back in the IDW as well, which was TV into comics then as well. And what was that kind of relationship like? Did you have to, you know, did you have to get direct contact with actors or the reps to sign off or deal directly with Paramount CBS and stuff? Or was it you just submitted stuff with their approval or they gave you a direction? How does one juggle all that?
Yeah, so it was mostly the latter. It was us going to Paramount CBS, and then they would run the approvals through their end. For the most part, the actors, at least the newer actors, didn't have likeness approval. Some of the
Hmm.
older actors were able to sort of retrofit that into their deals, in part because it behooves the studio to keep the talent happy.
Hmm.
Um, but like William Shatner didn't have approval, but I also think there's no chance William Shatner ever would have approved of any like. The only likeness that William Shatner ever approved of that I heard about was when John Byrne was doing the Star Trek photo comics. Um, Shatner saw those and he goes, "I love those. Those are great. Like I look great in those because they're stills pulled from the old show." And but that was fun because then Shatner wanted to do conventions with Byrne, so me, Byrne, and Shatner did a couple shows together and all hung out and got to know him that way, which was again just one of those weird things where you're just like, how am I sitting here just listening to these two talk? And I mean, even Byrne was just like the sort of total fanboy to Shatner, you know, because he was a kid when Star Trek aired and was just so enamored by it. So it was like the microcosm of that Saturday Night Live skit where Shatner goes, you know, tells the Star Trek fans get a life because John kept asking questions about Star Trek, and Shatner just goes, "John, can we talk about something else for a minute?" You know, so it was charming to see even a guy like John Byrne was still just a fan. But yeah, Star Trek was great. We did a number of different things over the years. I was able to get Harlan Ellison and Paramount CBS to kind of mend a 50-year-old broken fence kind of thing. That was a tortured analogy, but yeah, they hadn't talked in like half a century, you know, and so got them together and was able to do the Harlan script for City on the Edge of Forever, and so yeah, you know, with anything like that where there's been Star Trek comics since basically the first year of the TV series, you know, 66 was when Gold Key launched the Star Trek comics. Like trying to just keep it interesting to find new things to do that keep people excited was always a fun challenge because there's been a lot of Star Trek comics, and so it was fun to figure out new things to do with them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what prompted the question was I had students who back I used to teach video games as well prior before I set up the academy, and one of my students ended up working on I think it was Fleet Academy or something like that, and they were saying the whole rigmarole of sending the 3D models for approval for likeness back and forward. So I was wondering if it sounds though it's similar to the comics world as well in the back and forth onto it. And I take it you
I'm
were
sure
start.
Stephen Mooney. I bet Stephen Mooney can tell you some stories about like disapprovals, mostly on things like CSI. I don't think he had a too hard a time when he did the Mummy comics, Brendan Fraser, but CSI was interesting because you know the actors were older, they were in their 40s plus, you know the leads, and one of them called to really scold us for they said you know, always draw actors like they looked in college, not how they look on screen. Like, all right, well, that seems weird. Like you wouldn't be a 20-year-old CSI, but but yeah. So the likeness stuff is it runs the
I can
gamut from people who are real easy to people who really aren't.
I can imagine. And I take it you were a Trek fan yourself as well prior to walking onto the projects, or did you become more of a fan after walking onto the projects?
Yeah, and like when I was a kid, the first Star Trek I ever experienced were those little photo novels. You know, when they would cut up scenes and make little paperback books out of them. I think I even had those before I ever saw the TV show. But certainly the movies, like I was, you know, Star Trek's 2, 3, and 4, I thought were great. I never went too far down the road I started with Next Gen, and then I don't know, got busy with other things, and didn't really keep up too much after that, like all the other spin-offs. But
Hmm.
then when the J.J. Abrams movies came around, I was excited to see what those were going to be, and those were fun because they kind of built into the idea of the movies, some specific points that would work as comic books, which is nice when, the filmmakers are people who understand comics and understand like, different stories that can kind of connect to their film because they can only do so much in a couple hours. And so they held out a specific story for us to do in the comics that were tied in there, the countdown story, which that one worked really well because it brought in a lot of people that were Star Trek fans but didn't read comics, and so it sold well digitally and it sold well like through the mass market. It didn't really sell great as a comic store pro, as Sequential Comics, but once it was collected, it really hit like the broader Star Trek fan base and sort of brought a lot more people back in after that. So that was fun. Did a couple panels with some of the newer actors, and yeah, got to know like three or four of the original cast, which was, that was a lot of fun too.
That's awesome. And I can't help but notice the comic rack in the background as well. I imagine
Uh,
you must have you must have a pretty solid, I'd say, collection yourself, like just from the industry, the people you would know and everything. Are you still collecting, or is that something that you kind of have to temper yourself when you're going to shows? And it's obviously well, it's like what they say, don't get high in the supply, as they say. But
yeah, so I've been trying to like I don't keep new comics anymore. I always pass those on, which partly to my detriment. Like back at IDW, I'd buy comics, read them, and just leave them on a table for anybody who wanted them. But at one point, one of the comics I left on the table was like Walking Dead #1. I'm like, well, that would have been a pretty good comic to hold on to. But for the most part, like I've been trying to pare the collection down, which is hard, because it's just like decades of comics that you've accrued and collected over the years, and some of them are harder to part with than others. But for the most part, like I like having different books that look cool on the spinner rack, and so I've been trying to part with the bulk and just I don't know, grab the few that I really like the covers of because that for me has helped me sort of transition away from collecting and keeping everything to just keeping a much smaller amount of stuff. But then as happens, like those are also the ones that get more pricey too, and so but that's the kind of thing I like to hunt for at conventions, or like I'm doing a book that is related to a lot of the old Marvel horror comics from the 70s. And so those are fun to track those down because I never read that stuff like that. Those happened before I was reading comics, and so like having a reason to go dig through bins and find old cool back issues or fun covers. I'm also doing a book of Marvel covers that sort of categorizes the covers by the different themes that they've used over the years. The different broken logo covers or the different covers with the hero walking away with the costume on the ground saying "I quit," that kind of stuff. And so I'll occasionally, do. They started out me doing themes here, which, calling back to COVID, that was my like COVID survival technique was I would just like obsessively categorize or organize or like group comics by themes and stuff like that. Started out with holidays. In October I would do all horror covers, and Christmas I would do all Christmas covers. And then it sort of took on a whole life of its own. So anyway, yeah, that's one of my side pursuits.
It's awesome. One of the great things about setting up the academy is I was able to bring in like the comic collection and use books and references, which is wonderful because I'm like, I like collecting, but I don't like the idea of hoarding. I kind of want them like stuff to be on display. But the downside is when you see a student really enthusiastic and they just open the spine all the way or something like,
Mm.
oh, I really need to put down some more house rules or something. But we'll get there. We'll figure it out. I don't want to be like white glove kind of situation, but I do enjoy having like because you have some nice pieces around as well for them to work on, like some of the artwork of the books. So it's cool. You can see a page and then see the finished book as well. That's pretty awesome.
I
But
remember a friend of mine had Dave Gibbons sign his copy of Watchmen, and the pages were falling out, and the spine was broken. And he said Dave Gibbons couldn't have been any happier to see that the book was well loved and well read. And so I'm all, I kind of try to take care of some of the stuff, but I'm also like, this stuff was made to be read. Like, I have them in Mylars to protect them, but they're all openable and readable, and I don't I'm not a big seal everything away kind of guy. I like that, they're there to be read. The good thing too is that most of the stuff has been reprinted in so many different formats. I don't have to open those. I can just grab the collected edition off the shelf or something.
Absolutely. And are you much in the way of like digital comics yourself? Do you keep a digital archive or anything like that? Or do you prefer if you're going for a back issue just to pull out the trade?
But both. So I've got a bunch of digital comics I bought over the years. And I like Marvel's given me access to Marvel Unlimited, so when I need reference, I can find things that way too. And so I still just, I don't know, I just like the idea of holding a thing. I'll load a bunch of comics onto my iPad, and then rarely look at them or just kind of find myself just like flipping through them quickly. But when you're holding the book, like I just pay more attention to it. So it's still just one of those tactile things where I just kind of, I don't know, immerse myself in it more. I was looking at that John Byrne X-Men book. Like we printed that on uncoated, non-glossy paper, and I just find that so appealing to look at. And you know, iPads and all of that, like it's just glossy comics, and I like non-gloss, and so paper suits me better.
Oh, absolutely. It's all to do with the light source as well. Like once it's digital, it
Yeah,
comes from behind, and then if it's print, then and the absorption as well, the ink and the paper. I remember hearing the stories of Jim Lee in the early days where it was like he was never satisfied with a book he's seen because the ink that would be absorbed in all the paper all the time. So the compromises have to be made. Now it's an embarrassment of riches. Everyone's printing on
yeah,
National Geographic paper.
yeah.
And
I
in
mean, I will
terms,
say though, as far as print goes, like this is ridiculous. Like it's kind of reached its saturation point. So I'm like, all right, well, if I can get some of the stuff on digital, if I ever need it, maybe I can part with some of the books. So that's one of those ongoing processes. You spend half your life acquiring, and the other half trying to figure out how to part with it.
no, no, absolutely. Yeah, it's the burden of the collector, as they say. Um, and again, thanks so much for your time, Chris. And just before I let you go, I just want to ask you just one last question, which is we're currently at an interesting nexus point with so much happening in just the world in general on a technological scale. Like there's so much being said around AI, there's so much conversation and anxieties around the future of comics in terms of could the periodical or the floppy be give way finally to a pure digital entity, and then possibly the trades will step up and be more prominent then in terms of owning a physical comic or book. From your years of experience in the industry, like you've been there, the editorial side, from the creator side, the freelance side, from the collector and consumer side as well. Um, you've probably been privy as much as we have to this transformation, these changes happening. Um, what any opinions or thoughts, and where do you think, the next while in comics, what direction the wind might be blowing? Because of course people have said before a lot of times, comics are dead. They've been saying that since what, the 70s and the 80s. So we've been through that. But I think definitely maybe a moment of evolution or change. How have you experienced anything? Do you think it's just going to be business as usual, or do you think as well it'd be business as usual, but maybe a new dimension added onto it?
Yeah, the funny thing is, I think as an industry, comics has tried so hard to pretend that it's business as usual for decades without paying attention to some of the other market forces or consumer demand or all of that. And so I think there's often been a lot of like ostrigine, head in the ground, kind of pretending like, well, this is what we've always done, so we'll always do it this way, and hoping for the best. And I think that's not realistic. But I also think like there was a conversation recently where there was some rumor that Marvel's going to full webtoons, in 2030, and there will be no more print comics. And Rob Liefeld, said, "I second that. That's definitely happening." Like that's not happening. Like these are all comics you can see behind me, but like right behind me is a bunch of vinyl records, and like vinyl records were dead, and the MP3s have taken over the world, and there will be no more, you know, heavy plastic being made because everything's digital now, and that's the greatest future we could ever face, and all of that. Like, and it was all garbage, like yes, people can sort of stream the disposable stuff and just have music playing in the back, but there's also people that like the artifact, or the people that like the nice higher end stuff. And so what I think will happen in comics is what's kind of already been happening is maybe some of the cheaper made stuff goes away. I don't know, maybe periodicals need to, maybe not everything needs to be a monthly comic or a 4-issue miniseries if it's something unknown that is very hard for the creator to make money at, it's very hard for the retailer to make money selling, it's hard for the fan to get invested in because it's there and gone so quick. So I can't imagine a world anytime soon where Spider-Man and Batman and titles like that stop publishing print comics because people still want that, and those are compelling books that get people going into stores or buying them however they're buying them. But some stuff will probably be tested, to a greater degree as digital, and then if it finds traction, um, then a print version happens. Like Lore Olympus is a good example of that. Lore Olympus was a book that was just a webtoons kind of thing, and it was the scrolling book, and people read on their phone. Um, but then enough people liked it that it became print books and became this whole thing in print. And so I think digital as a proving ground is great, but I will everything go the way of digital? I think as we've already seen with so many of these big digital providers, pulling movies or streaming services, pulling shows that you'll never be able to find again because they just decided that they don't want to keep it on their platform. I think a lot of fans are going, well, no, I'm not just renting this stuff from you guys. Like, I want to own the stuff. So you can't decide for me what I have access to. And so I think that, and I also think like with vinyl, production values matter. Like you get an oversized book on nice paper. Like I think that's really hard to replicate in digital. And so I think as long as people are putting care and time and spending some money to make a nice artifact that people want to own, there's going to be people that want to own them. I mean, maybe it becomes more of like a digital thing where it's like a smaller overall percentage of the consumer is buying the physical product, but I think there's no way there won't be that physical product. Look at like the crowdfunding platforms. You can, I don't know, your typical 32-page comic book is $10, $15 on there, and they get back to a high degree because people not only want to support each other and people they know, but also they still just like the thing and they don't necessarily want a provider or a retailer deciding what they have access to. And so they'll just go out and make it and get it on their own. And so I don't know. I feel good about where things are headed. Like I know the value proposition is tough in comics. You're spending $4, $5, $6 on a book that takes 10 minutes to read, and that's basically what a streaming service. Well, 2 years ago, what a streaming service used to cost you. Um, so I think trying to figure out the value proposition, like I'm sort of babbling and going in all kinds of directions right now, I realize, but like
But no, it's
DC
good.
is doing those DC compact books, which is 300 pages of material for $10, and those are selling great. They're finding new fans. They're the kind of thing where you bring them on a plane if you happen to leave it behind. Like it's not a huge investment. They're nicely portable, and like I say, a lot of pages for a low price. And I think those are the kind of things that like the big publishers, I think it's smart for them to do more of because they've got 80 years of back catalog that they can sort of afford to put out in those formats to help foster the idea of reading stuff in print and help bring in new readers and help or lapsed readers and what have you. So I don't know. I think all of those kind of things are good efforts to keep people reading and buying stuff more so than doing endless variant covers, which that feels like, that's been a dicey proposition forever.
Yeah, yeah, that's might be going to the well one too many times. The varying covers all right, but the point you make there on the ability to actually own it as well, that's actually a very valid point because a lot of film connoisseurs and collectors now have realized that. You've seen it where people have. I thought I bought this on Apple or YouTube, and suddenly it's no longer there because the license expired. But if you have the
Yeah.
DVD or the Blu-ray, then you do actually have it. So I suppose that sense of ownership is going to be tenement at the top of the collector's mentality for sure. Absolutely. Um,
I think like it's easy to soapbox this sort of thing, but like I think as the people that own these tech companies and the prevalence of AI doing so many harmful things, like has shown everybody that like the tech companies couldn't care less about you and they couldn't care less about you wanting to be able to have access to stuff that you previously paid for. Like if your Kindle is more than 10 years old, your books are no longer available on there. And so anything you even thought you were buying, you weren't. You were renting until they decide to pull it off of there. And I just think there's a growing number of people that are tired of having, the people that are profiting off of all of us making the decisions for us too. And so they can't take your book away, you know? And so I think more and more people are just, I don't know, getting fed up with the way it's so much more obvious now that we have no say over even the stuff that we thought we had say or control over.
Yeah. Now, you said they can't take your book away. If we end up in Fahrenheit 451, Chris, I'm playing with you.
I mean, but they have sharp corners. Like we can fight back.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, no, this has been a wonderful conversation, Chris. It was so good to catch up after all this time. Really exciting to hear about everything that you've been working on and what you have coming up as well. It's awesome. Hopefully now it won't be another nearly decade and a half before we talk
yeah.
again. And hopefully, if the stars align, we'll see you back over this side of the Atlantic sometime as well.
Oh man, I would love that so much. I had such a good time when I was over there for shows. Like I did a show in Derry, I did a show in Dublin. Like it's amazing country, and I would love to come back. And I love what you're doing. I love that you're helping sort of proselytize and spread the word and help people make comics and learn about comics. And so yeah, this has been great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and all the best for everything, Chris. Thanks a million.
You too. Cheers.